This is awesome.
All right, we are live, everyone. Happy Friday. It is August 8th, and you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can chat along with our Twitter chat at #CMGR Hangout, where some of you are watching. And if you love what you're seeing today and have a great idea or a topic or want to join us live any day, just hit us up at mycmgr.com and click on Participate. If you work in community, you know that developing thick skin is an essential skill. As nice as it would be, not all of your community members will love you or your brand all the time. So how do you stay calm to handle situations with angry members, and what do you do to keep perspective when attack gets personal? We've got some great community managers with us today. Some have been with us before and some not, but I'm really excited. I am Sherry Rohde, and I usually co-host this chat with Brew. But he's not here today, so co-hosting with me is Brian Vanzo, and I'll go ahead and have him introduce himself.
So I started off talking to mute, so that's a great start for Friday. Brian Vanzo, iSocialFans on Twitter, currently the Chief Digital Strategist at BroadSuite, and I'm calling from beautiful Phoenix, Arizona today, where it's a cold front came through and it's only 104. So glad to be co-hosting. I will channel my inner goatee for Brew, and as we introduce some new guests as well as some old faces.
Awesome, thanks, Brian. Daniel, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? You need to unmute there.
This is high-tech stuff, so let me try again. So I'm the other half. I work with Brian at BroadSuite, founder, and my community is Millennial CEO, longtime author. I wrote a couple books and work with about 25 different companies, mostly B2B, text-based, and I help manage social content community and driving their brands to be found, seen, and heard.
Awesome, thank you, Daniel. David?
I am David Dewald at thunderhead.com. We specialize in documents, customer communication. That's the better way for it. I'm in Austin, Texas, where it is a lovely 93 degrees today.
Nice. I'm a little bit jealous. Threadless guys.
We're looking up the temperature. We want to share too.
We didn't realize the temperature was something that we needed. So
yeah, no, it's what those in Arizona.
Brian started it.
Yeah, we complain about it in the summer, and we like to brag about wearing shorts at Halloween. So that's just kind of what we do in Arizona. I apologize.
So I've got to say I love Arizona weather. Probably because I'm not in it day after day, but that dry heat's pretty nice.
So is an oven.
So yeah, I'm Kyle Geib. I'm a marketing manager over here at Threadless.com, and this is Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess Hannaberry. I'm our brand producer. It's kind of a combination of our community manager position mixed with a little bit of creative producer function.
And we're coming to you guys from Chicago, and it is
79.
It's 79 degrees.
We love talking about the weather too, because after the winter we had, especially this year, so we're very happy to hear how everybody's feeling.
Fellow Chicagoans.
Oh, awesome.
All right.
Well, I'm out in the suburbs, but I tell everybody that doesn't live here that I'm from Chicago.
That's the way it goes, though, right?
It's easier than explaining it.
That's true.
All right, thanks, guys. Laura?
My name is Laura Acapinti. I'm in New Jersey. I started a group called New Jersey Young Professionals. It's a face-to-face community, so there's about 5,000 dues-paying members, 20 to 30 events a month. And recently I launched Grow Your Social Group, where I help others do the same, so the face-to-face community growing.
Awesome, thank you. Mark?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me here, guys. First, can everyone hear me okay? I don't know if my mic's on. Is there any sound?
You're good.
Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, great. Right now I'm actually in Beijing, China. It's a nice, cool 73 degrees, and it's a little late or early, depending on how you look at it. It's 2 a.m. here, so I'm happy to be here and have a chat with everybody. I work for a company called Red Atoms, where we do mobile game development, and there I lead the mobile game North American team, and I lead community management and game design and a few other things. So I'm just here to talk and get ideas and share what I think I've learned over the past 2 years.
Yeah, I'm a former video game community manager. I feel your
Nice.
pain.
Thanks. Yeah, it could be. It's a journey, that's for sure, I think.
Awesome. Thanks. Glad to have you here. And Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Braulio, and I am the community manager of Pet360.com. We are an online pet supply retailer, and I run the branded community. Pet people are notoriously a little overzealous, so and I was a public defender for 10 years, so I'm used to being hated and yelled at. So it's been a big process developing thick skin.
Note taken. I'm going to stay away from live debates there.
All right, glad to have you guys all here. I'll go ahead and get us started with our first question, which is, what's your immediate reaction when confronted privately by a community member?
I'd say private is probably the easiest way because nobody else can see it. It's not going to cause any extra drama in the community. First reaction is to read it and try and figure out what the problem really is. Often it's not as plainly written as you'd like it, and just try to address them in whatever they're bringing to the table. If they're just trying to rip you a new one, then you save it because it's hilarious, and then move on.
I would. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
All right, I was going to say when I respond, and it's private, I definitely try to validate their feelings, like right off. I'm sorry, I understand that you're upset, I understand you're angry, I understand you're disappointed, and then go on to make sure they understand that you're hearing them and that that you let them know that you're going to look into it, whatever the issue was. So I feel like validating their feelings as soon as they understand that like what they're saying, it helps a lot. Helps diffuse the situation.
Yeah, I think that's right too. I think it depends on what form of communication it is. One time we had one of our community members from the U.S. contact our Chinese office looking for someone to talk to. That was a really interesting experience, and I think my first immediate reaction then was actually how relieved I was that it was over the phone and it's something you can handle on a more personal basis. So I think when it comes to phone calls, at least privately, it's always a bit of a relief, and it's a lot easier to handle than
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's almost,
I was going to say when I was in the gaming world, oftentimes when we had someone that was really heated with you, if you picked up the phone and called them, it was like a totally different person on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
They suddenly are like super calm and super relaxed, and they're not trying to be as vile as they maybe were in their message. So definitely that one-on-one, semi-face-to-face, voice-to-voice can definitely change the tone of the whole conversation.
Yeah, I think we used to. I was in the customer service side, and we always called the keyboard the bully's tool, the bully's weapon, because lots of people can throw bullets and really talk a lot of things behind the keyboard, sending emails. But if you get them face to face or on the phone, they'll usually either back down or change their story, or if you treat them like a coach, I always say you say there's no dumb question, but this is what you see, right? That's usually the private thing. I think it's also important kind of to. I'm a big fan of saying, hey, once the thing's resolved, hey, can you put this question on the public forum so that we can address it for everybody if it's not something that's like a personal one-on-one, just so that everyone can learn from it, because I'm like the anti-personal one-to-one messenger when it comes to community, because I like it to be if one person's usually having the problem, more than likely someone else will have it down the road. So I think that's something just to kind of keep in mind from the private side, at least from the communities that I'm involved with.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I think there's something to be said there about the fact that people are speaking up, and it's something. So as far as the first reaction is probably appreciation. This is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I've been watching a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy interviews and stuff this week, and I think I'm not sure who said it, but I think Chris Pratt was saying something about like anything about haters, that this isn't how it originally was, or this isn't from the comic. You should just, anybody who is complaining about something or upset about something is someone who probably cares about your brand the most. So just the fact that people are speaking up is super important. And then I think it's a matter of defining, are these people, how can I help this person? Are they really upset about something that's fixable? And are other people feeling this but not saying anything at all? So I think that thing about making it a public answer is really important, kind of letting everybody answer who's kind of only answering in their, or asking the question in their head, or being upset in their head without speaking up.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's kind of where it kind of works out, interestingly when it comes to, diffusing it as well as kind of taking it and understanding how you can, learn and get better from the thing. I use the hashtag. Actually, just wrote a blog on it about, with haters gonna hate. That's like my favorite hashtag to use, maybe second favorite, but and that's just something you oftentimes those but you also have to realize and listen to what they're not saying, or maybe why they're saying it, less than just what they're saying, because oftentimes, someone just wants to say, hey, I want someone to know that I'm here, or I want to be heard, but really what they're saying has less value than just, okay, now the community manager knows I'm here and they're paying attention to me, and, and that forth. I think that kind of goes good, leading into our second question there we have is, what's your immediate reaction when confronted publicly by a community member?
I was gonna jump in at the end of that last one, but you jumped a little ahead. So I'll start here on this one with the public. I'd say the private, or any time where you as the brand gets directly involved with the client or customer or community member, you guys always got to see it as an opportunity to to build advocacy, right? I mean, in the long and the short of it is, we live in these communities and we talk to each other all the time. But say we spend hours every day on a social platform like Twitter, but how many times do you talk to someone from Twitter? So that first time that you connect with that person, it's going to make a lasting impression of you and that brand. So, I say every time, whether it's public or private, the first thing I think about is, how do I build sentiment here? How do I carry on a relationship that's going to be more meaningful forward, whether that customer is completely upset and angry, or they're reaching out to the community to give praise? It's how do we, use this to build further relationships going forward?
If I can jump in, I'd say that usually my first reaction when someone either bashes us, or I've had it personal, in public, usually my first feeling is a bit of dread, because it's, it can really go either way. Obviously, I've tried to do all of those things that we've been trained to do to turn them into a real advocate. It's just, I always feel that initial gut reaction of, how is this going to go concern? Is this going to become a snowball? Or is this going to be something that is easily extinguishable, and I can turn it around? So that's my first initial reaction.
Yeah, if I could jump in here real quick, I think when it comes to being confronted publicly, there's a little bit more preemptive thought that needs to go into it, because when it's a one-on-one conversation and it's private, it's very easy to clarify if you make a misstep. In the public sphere, people are looking for those missteps. Mm-hmm. I mean, not every time, but they're looking for those missteps. They're looking for you to slip up, and they're looking to pull you in a certain direction. Not always, but mm-hmm. There's a lot more forethought involved in the public sphere when reaching out to a community member, and also the thought of, you're not only directly reaching out to this community member in the public sphere, other people are seeing this, so in a way you're having a one-on-one conversation that is involving more than two people.
Yeah, I think to jump on what you're saying though is don't wait though. Like, the thought process is important, but don't wait to respond to people in terms of, like, even if it's just, hey, we've got your, we see your note, let us figure out what we, let us get together and talk a little bit and see how we can help. Because I think there's an issue of immediacy these days. Like they said, like 40%, there's some odd stat, but want a response within 2 hours, and like 30+% want a response online to something in 30. And I think the interesting thing is a lot of times people want to wait and come up with the perfect answer, but in a kind of a human-to-human world that we live in, a lot of us would just like to know we're being listened to. And the bigger the community gets, the more we're kind of sitting there going, are they even hearing me? I had an issue with T-Mobile, and they're a great brand with a really strong community, and I was trying to get help from them. And literally, they were doing some weird things, deleting posts and making them go away. And no matter what ended up happening in the long run, that first impression they had by not just saying, hey, we're going to work on it or help you, it just set the wrong tone the entire way going forward.
And I think that's part of, especially with the public side, I think we have to remember also that, like, if you can turn every failure, or especially other people's failures, into learning opportunities for the community, I think then it kind of shows that you're really focused on community growth rather than just kind of exploiting a failure. So, I used to always say, like, did you thank someone after they realized they were wrong? And that's, something that, you solve their problem, they go, oh, thanks, I can't believe I made that mistake. And you're like, saying a thank you for doing that, now someone else won't make that mistake, and it's something we have in the open air. Like, I think that's often like that, patting them on the back, even if it's a question, because I think the biggest mistake, like Daniel was saying, is saying nothing nowadays. We not only are we in a connected society and a connected community, but we are, really in a world. And I'm guessing that, in the gaming community too, that's a big one where, most of those gripes and things are happening in the moment, in either the heat of the battle or after a couple drinks or a couple Mountain Dews and feeling like you're fired up enough to take on the world.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It's a good.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in terms of developing thicker skin to handle these kinds of things, I think too the only way out is through it. So deleting posts, like you had mentioned in that one community, or waiting too long to respond, is really not helping you to get used to handling these kind of events in the future. You really have to take it, deal with it, work through it, feel the emotions, whether it's anxiety that you're not going to appease this customer or this community member, because the more you do it, the easier it's going to be in the future.
Yeah, I was going to say you should never, ever, unless it's really just horribly hateful and atrocious conversation, delete something, because the community will instantly think you're trying to hide something.
Screen grabs are forever.
And they will take them, and they will post them right after you deleted it. So,
and then you just created a whole new issue for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's important. You want to be able to say I don't know, right? Because just letting them know that you heard them and say, hey, I'll research this or I'll get into it, saying you don't know is often the better answer than saying something that is off the cuff or something that got you pissed off. I think that's right where you're going, right, Dave? Because I think that's part of it where, you say that one thing and like, crap, I shouldn't have done that. By the time you go back to delete it or you go back to say, I want to correct that, they've already screen captured that, put you on blast, and now you're doing, damage control instead of just saying, hey, I don't know, let me get back to you. And most people can do that. I know, like Hootsuite did a really good job with that with me yesterday. I had a billing problem, and they're like, I never heard that problem. Let me get back to you. And if they wouldn't have sent that message and they would have waited the 4 hours to solve my problem, I probably would have been fired up. But 4 hours later, they sent me, hey, we fixed it. Your refund will be there in 2 days. And I went out there and said, hey, this is awesome customer service, because they weren't aware of the issue. They had never heard of it, but yet they clued me in enough to where I didn't feel like my voice wasn't heard, because I probably would have taken to email or phone or something else as well.
I think that's a great point if you think about it. I mean, if you think about this all, imagine it if it was an IRL, conversation. Say you're walking up to Best Buy, the help desk at Best Buy, and someone says, this isn't working, can you help me? And the person there might not know how to fix it, right? But he doesn't just look at you and walk away and go wait 4 hours till he fixes it, right? I think it's super important to always imagine this as a real conversation you're having with people. Emails can wait, but tweets are real life conversations, and you can just acknowledge that the person tweeted, and then go do the research.
Yeah, and I think if it's a conversation that you're worried could get worse as the conversation is public, you can always just say, hey, I sent you a private email, or I sent you a private message. Can we take this to email? Can you drop me an email? And that will usually stop the conversation from where it is public. But once you've resolved it, it's always a good idea to go back to that conversation where that person originally posted and say, did we take care of everything you need publicly? And then give them the opportunity to respond in the thread where they first said, I have a problem, and you said, send me an email. That way you can come back and say, are you good? And they can say yes. And there's that whole string of bad situations, somebody stepped in, we resolved it, and they get to see that circle where the issue is covered. Gaming communities, I mean, we touched on it briefly a little bit ago, can be really tough because sometimes you can't solve their situation. It's a situation where, maybe the game doesn't allow you to do that, or maybe they've done something and it just has caused you to be in a situation where you cannot help them. And you often have to have the ability to say no to people, knowing that it is going to cause grief and that you're going to have to deal with it. I'm sure that you can offer some additional information on that too.
Well,
well, if I could jump in just real quick, one of the things that my first reaction, I think, too, and it's important, I'll probably be touching on this for the rest of the talk. My first reaction when confronted publicly, I see it as a chance to help more than one person at one time. Because like you guys said earlier, is if someone has said something, there's most likely about 10 other people experiencing the same thing and they're not saying anything about it. So I take that first reaction and I kind of use it as a specific time to be optimistic on helping others. And if for the most part, if you operate from a standpoint of kind of transparency, then it's a lot easier to feel confident going in, knowing that you're going to work this out and it's going to be okay. And for the most part, like you've been saying, it's nice to acknowledge in my case, my players, and quickly, and kind of be there to say, hey, I understand you have an issue. And for a lot of game communities, it's very difficult to come at it from a passionate point of view, especially if you're not technically a player in the past. But I always stress this to people I meet and they ask me for advice. I would say the first thing to developing any tough skin in a public situation or a private one is to be more compassionate towards the people you're talking about, or towards the people you're talking to. And I always welcome public chances to do that, I think.
Yeah, you got to remember that sometimes people just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about people that really you may have no way to fix their problem. And I mean, that's one of those things, like you as a community manager, like they have an immediate reach to you and they want to let you know what's going on. There's some percentage, and I don't know what it is, I'm speculating, but of people who do not reach out expecting answers. It's much like anybody you have a relationship with. They really just want to make sure that they have some way to vent their frustration. I mean, especially if they're looking for something miraculous. It goes back to that old adage, people say it's, the customer's always right. And I say the customer's not always right, but the customer is always the customer. And these are essentially your customers, and the best thing you can do is what he just said, Mark, is empathy and compassion. It starts there. Seek first to understand. There's a lot of parallels. For those of us who worked before the digital sphere in any sort of customer service capacity in 3D in real life for companies, that really you guys are the ultimate customer experience department, and you're just like there's a real-time component, and you're using the digital channels to execute it. So that was a great point about compassion.
I think it also helps you as a community manager, because once you realize that and accept that, it can help you put a little distance between them venting, because you know that it's not a personal thing, they're just angry, they need to get it off their chest, and accepting that you can empathize with that because we've all had that bad experience, and I know for me personally it makes it a little bit easier to swallow hearing it.
So I know we kind of already jumped into this, but I just want to officially jump into question 3, which is, what steps do you take before responding to an angry community manager?
Yeah, I think this is a good one.
Sorry, member.
I think this is a good one from a standpoint of, like, if you think of it as, like everyone says, you think before you speak, but there's a couple, I always used to have little tricks with people on, if you had one of those squish balls or a Rubik's Cube, or you had something that you were able to step away or have a second or two, or I used to work in the help desk for Dish Network, and what they would always tell us, embrace the mute button. So, which is funny because you'd be like, let me put you on hold for a second, and oftentimes it wasn't because I needed to get anybody, but it was because I couldn't believe that you just called me a jerk, that you couldn't believe that your TV that's in your 18-year-old kid's bedroom has been ordering Playboy for the month, and it wasn't yours, right? So, you put them on mute, you calm yourself, you kind of take that break, and then come back and go, I apologize for that. Let's see if we can refund that and maybe put parental guidance on there. And I don't know why your 18-year-old son would be doing that, but I think that's part of it. Is really like, does anyone have like rituals or things they do that is kind of that way to get them out of that passion zone? Because I'm passionate about way too much. I jump down quick.
Just make sure you got the mute button on, because that's
Yeah,
a great
that's
way
true.
to, in these days, and when you're on video, a mute button doesn't stop them from reading your lips, yeah. So
True,
just
true.
think about that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
usually
I think that
class for if I really have to just kind of stand up and just back away from the computer before I say something I'm never going to regret.
I think that the beauty of the age that we're in now is that if you really need a second, you can.
We're gonna have to put in that fund for David to get new internet.
He's taking a second before he responds.
Yep. There he goes. We're gonna start the collection, Dave.
God bless America.
So take a
Thank
break.
you, Time Warner
before you
Cable. Thank
reply
you.
to
Thank you.
Here's a good example of you need to take a deep breath before you blast the cable unit.
Yes. No names mentioned. Time Warner Cable. So the beauty of our age is mobile age is that even if you are at your desk, you can always type in, on my phone, give me a minute to get back to my desk, and that gives them a response. They know you've heard them, and it gives you some time to work out what you're going to do for them or how you're going to approach it. And everybody understands that you're on the phone, it's hard to type. They're going to give you a minute or two to get ready to do what you need to do, and that can give you a buffer. It's a little false, I know, but sometimes you just need a break before you respond to somebody. And I think it's important to remember also that they're not necessarily mad at you. You just happen to be the person between them and the problem.
Man, David, I think you're throwing me a softball there, because I think that jumps into question 4, like with the easiest one possible. So we can elaborate on 3 for sure, but it's how do you keep perspective when attacks get personal? Because there's an element of I laugh a lot of times because there are a lot of brands that use the caret sign with the initials of the person replying on social media, and they also if you're doing it from a MyCMGR account and you don't know who's behind that account, if it's Tim, Sherry, or Brew, I'm going to reply to them differently. But I think part of that is when they do take it personally, when they do know who's behind there, they do know, and they start that personal one. I think this is a good one to kind of how do you handle taking it a step further?
I think it's good if you always see an attack as an opportunity to look at whether or not you are doing something wrong. So it's all right for you to make mistakes and do things wrong as long as you're taking a step back, looking at it. Maybe there is a way I could do it differently. So it's not taking it personal, just seeing it as an opportunity for change.
I think there's something to be said for making sure you know who exactly it is you're talking to. I mean, not only do we as managers have profiles for our brands, but the person you're talking to has a profile, and I think it's always good to take a breath and take a look at some of the other tweets they tweet, because I think it gives you an idea of is this person generally someone who is outspoken about things, or is this if this is the one time they've tweeted about anything, then you know that they're taking the time to reach out to you. Sometimes people, I'm not talking about specifically trolls, but sometimes people are more vocal than others, and I think to take a moment and brace yourself and figure out exactly kind of their tone when they're talking to you is super important. To just take a step back and figure out who your audience is there.
Yeah, I think that's an important one. Just from an aspect too of we used to put on. I remember the slider. It was on a sign. It was like just because you're having you're apologizing doesn't mean you're admitting you're wrong. And oftentimes the community manager has to be the apologetic. Hey, I sympathize with you. I understand where you're coming from, but you realize you never clicked send and you closed your browser and it didn't post. And I'm sorry that's how the internet works. Like part of that is really coming to the idea that we all are make mistakes. We all do little things like that, because that's part. I can't stand when I see a reply on any community where someone just immediately blasts and says, "Nope, you're wrong. Here's the link." And it's like, well, apparently that link wasn't in the right spot, or they didn't know about that link, or they probably would have gone there. So if you have a better way of describing it, giving them a little bit of the path, and and I guess I usually am kid gloves until someone really takes it personally. And I think maybe David's rolling his eyes over there because he is less kid gloves than I do. But I think that's part of the thing when someone goes personal is if I remember a coach telling me in high school when someone was talking trash and we were winning, just point at the scoreboard and smile, and that usually either quieted them or that was my way of talking back instead of fueling them.
I'm actually
Setting boundaries, like you were just talking about, because how much you're going to let someone verbally abuse you is something that really you need to decide. How much will I take? How much do I have to take? I can remember being in front of a judge every day who was so incredibly verbally abusive to the attorneys in the room, calling names. It was awful. And it really got to the point where I would just totally zone out. And just let them yell. I'd do the courtesy head nod, the little facial expression to act like I was listening to him, but I really wasn't, even though I could guess what he was saying. And then once he was done, moved on. And, the few times that I've had community members really, really lash out at me and call me names and things like that, I don't even read all of it sometimes because I know that, one, it's verbally abusive, and two, there's really no reason to put myself through reading.
Yeah. I had an experience recently kind of outside of Threadless. My boyfriend was at the World Cup. This guy called Teddy Roosevelt, and he was getting, all of a sudden he was kind of a social media celebrity kind of thing, and I was managing his account, and this one guy started yelling at him on Twitter that he wasn't wearing the right jersey and that kind of thing, and he was kind of taking it to heart. But then I took a minute to look at his own Twitter, and his other tweets were him tweeting pictures of people's license plate that only had one headlight and tweeting their license plate number. So I was like, well, sometimes this is a person that just wants to kind of shout on the internet, and I think that's the time where you just keep quiet and you let them shout, if that makes any sense.
Another idea too is move them over, like move them off the platform, get them off of social.
Yeah.
Try to get if they start getting really tough and really hard, if you want to keep the experience, because like you said, I think that last comment was great, because some people just want to pick fights on the internet, and everybody's got a giant pair of whats when they're online, and you get them on the phone, and maybe they'll still be mad. Throw them up on a hangout, but make them look you in the eye, because it really humanizes people. And when you humanize yourself and you humanize them, it gets back to, I'm a person, you're a person, you have an issue, I'm hoping, going to try, going to do what I can to help you. I used that example about T-Mobile earlier. I was really mad. But at the end, the people that were screwing up my service weren't really the people that I should be mad at. It was people in much higher offices that were screwing up paperwork and account information and not doing anything about it. So, that natural reaction, though, is I was really a lot tougher on them online than I was when I actually got them offline and started talking to them on the phone. And it ended up getting resolved. And the relationship is still there. I'm still a customer.
I think I pulled a tweet from McDonald, who was always dropping knowledge and insights. He said, important to remember that every customer and community member has a cost, and to make sure that it doesn't outweigh the return. I think that's a good reminder too. That's and I think it kind of jump on what Daniel was saying as well. Like when I would coach leadership and I would kind of work on the leadership side, I would always try, if it's the manager's responsibility as well as the leader's responsibility, that if something gets stepped over the line, the leader takes the bullet, right? The manager should jump in there and take the blame and be the one. So if you're reporting to the CEO or you're reporting to, a director in your line, like I think having that communication, like, hey, this guy's stepped over the line, I need help. Like that's their job, like, as you move up the chain. And oftentimes they're, I'd say great leaders are not only listening but willing to do that and jump on the sword without having that conversation. But too often in the community space, we end up feeling like we're on our own island, and just being able to reach out to that person either above you or maybe if it's even another community manager and say, hey, can you back me up here? Because 2 versus 1 is a little bit helps you out even if someone's taking it personal, and you kind of switch the conversation. So I think we'll jump into question 5 real quick. And how do your reactions change when the confrontation involves additional community members? So here's the when you go 2v1 or 1v1 to kind of a group.
So I've often found that these, if it's a group of people, they are what I would call a vocal minority instead of a vocal majority. Typically, you'll see that, for in any community, you know how it goes. There's many more people that are reading and looking than there are actually posting. So when you have a bunch of people glom onto it, yeah, that means you probably should look and see what's going on. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's as big a problem as they may be making it seem. Um, you should, treat it as you would with an individual. If there's a bunch of individuals having issues, then one by one work through it. If it's a greater issue that you can solve for everybody at once, do it that way. But just, as we've said a million times today, make sure they feel like they've been heard, and that will usually diffuse a lot of it.
I think as Brian said earlier, like look for it as an opportunity to expand and connect to the community. If someone's reaching out or a small quorum is reaching out to you or whatever, why not ask the community and say, hey, is anyone else struggling with this? We're thinking about maybe putting some effort behind coming up with some additional content or documentation to support this issue. If quickly you start to see a snowball of responses, you're like, hey, we're onto something here. And as David said, if it's crickets, you may be dealing with the 3 loudest people in the community, but they may be the only 3 having this problem.
A good point.
And I think that also goes to, like, if you think of it from the standpoint of, everyone likes to complain, but when you ask for volunteers to be beta testers or be your ambassadors or be your leaders, it's crickets, right? And so, like, I often be like, man, that's a great find. How'd you get that? And actually, I give a shout out to, Buffer, who I'm actually repping their shirt just because it was what was clean this morning. But that's how they kind of got me in their beta testing of their tool. I wouldn't say I was complaining, but I felt like I was paying for something, and I wanted to see a couple of these features, and I kept bringing them up. And rather than them kind of pushing back and saying, hey, just wait till the next version, they're like, hey, we'd love you to step up and join our beta community on Facebook and help us mitigate these issues before they go public to everyone else. And not only did that feel like they heard me, but they were willing to listen and do something about it. Because too often we have feedback, we want feedback, we ask for feedback, or we're in a conversation, then you get the conversation that's not friendly, and you all of a sudden just shy away from it. I think part of it's like twisting that and empowering the community with the haters. Even I've always said for companies that hire their best customers, they end up having their best advocates internally now, because your best customers or your loudest customers often that's because they care, not because they just like hearing themselves heard, even though that is often the case too.
I want to kind of switch gears a little bit here. I know Mark had this question and Rebecca has some background in this as well, but how do you handle the stress when potential legal actions are part of the confrontation?
This is the way we handled it in the past. If they do anything at all that is, I'm going to sue, I'm contacting a lawyer, you just immediately shut down the conversation and say, you will have to contact our legal department. And from there, it's at least out of my hands, because anything from that point on is you become a liability. So just shut them down and say, here's the address for the legal department, here's the phone number for the legal department. It's on you now. Contact them. And often you will find that they're just being boisterous, and they'll back off and say, well, it's not all that bad, and let's see if we can work this out. But I've had 1 or 2 people actually call the legal department and try and work it out. But that's just the way that we've handled any kind of legal threat in the past.
And I think, David, you got to jump on top of that too. And having been a business owner and a CEO and run companies in my past, is everything you say has legal discourse, right? Rebecca probably can say more than this, but it doesn't matter if they claim that they're going to contact legal or not. You just have to remember that what you're writing, especially since everything you're putting on the internet is written, and you don't know who's recording. So don't assume just because you're on a phone call that you're any safer. They may be running call recording software. So, I say always operate within the onus of showing genuine intent to help, genuine interest in taking care of their problems. And I've said this from a customer experience, for community is a part of this, but customer experience for the longest time, be calm on the call, take care of business, and I don't care if you need to, if you're ready to break down and get into tears, get off the phone, you can go into the closet, punch somebody, kick your dog, scream, do whatever you got to do, but finish the call calm. finish yourself under control. And then when you get off the call, do what you got to do to normalize. But just remember, like, I totally agree. As soon as they claim legal, you need to disconnect. But don't ever act under the onus that they may not be thinking that already.
Right, right. I just want to go on record as saying no dogs were harmed in this podcast.
It's okay if I say kick your cat, though, right? We've determined that. Oh, okay. You know, and you know I'm kidding, right? I don't need to become an overnight internet sensation. This guy, you know, wants to kick his dog.
Community members will start going crazy on you.
Purely metaphor, people.
Yeah, dog is better though because there's not a day named after them. With cat or day, I stay away from cats now since someone gave them a day.
Don't do this to me, Brian. Don't do this.
I would just say, I mean, reinforce what everyone else says. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit more cynical about it with the suing threats, and probably should take it a little bit more seriously than I do. I'm sure our legal team would prefer that I do. We haven't gotten that much lately, but you know, just completely disengaging, and always in general, especially if you're arrested, don't say anything. You know, use that right to remain silent.
Yeah, from a PowerShip play, I had a weird thing happen. I was driving across the country from Virginia to Arizona, and I got pulled over in Tennessee, and they pulled over 2 red trucks, and one had Tennessee plates and one had Virginia plates. And funny as it was, is they let the guy with Tennessee go, and the guy gave me a ticket, then went through and gave me about 6 tickets. And as he was doing it, I kind of pulled the card, was like, well, I think this was out of line. Not only are you doing things, I was like, I'm going to get a lawyer. And he just looked at me and said, sorry, son, there's not a chance you're going to spend the money to fly back down here and fight it. Good luck to that. So, of course, I flew back down there a month and a half later, and he didn't show up. And everything got thrown out of court. But it was quickly that, if someone's going to, pull that bluff and then you challenge back, you better be prepared to handle it. Because when I walked in the courtroom, I was ready to defeat him, and he didn't even have the nerve to show up. I think that's just kind of a funny thing that came to mind as I was thinking about the legal action, because oftentimes when they threaten you and then you threaten back, then it's a worse situation than just kind of taking that and pleading the fifth. All right, and we'll jump into the next one where we have so like what other tips do you have for building thick skin, other than kicking dogs, and, that side. So I think the thick skin element is like, well, what secrets do you have? What other tips, tricks, things you like to, music you listen to?
I'd like to jump in on this one. I would say that you really need to keep it in your mind whether you have like 500, 5,000, or 50,000 community members. If 1 or 2 are upset and the ones that lashing out at you, but everyone else is pretty happy, like that's what I always go back to. Like just because there's a few bad apples doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job or that like the product is bad. So I look at the happy people to keep it in perspective.
Really and truly, I think there's one thing that people can do to ultimately build a thick skin, and that's to volunteer to be a moderator on any video game forum. You build a thick skin, they will make you build a thick skin because they will be vile and hateful, and they're just passionate. I mean, ultimately they want everything to be perfect for them and everybody else, but they will rip you a new one.
It's something about that TV element. I would say the same thing. We had issues with the Super Bowl, TV issues with Dish Network when I was working there around the Super Bowl time. And you want to talk about some passionate people that they have their friends over, beers ready, and their Super Bowl's not on the TV. And I'm a diehard football fan, so that's another one. And I think I would go to my other favorite hashtag of screenshot awesomeness, because when you have that portfolio of awesomeness sitting around of all the things that you do, all the great wins, and you have those haters, you have those people that are beating you down, if you go there and kind of give you that, pat in the back, like, oh yeah, this is all the, these are just the few people that aren't agreeing with you, and especially from a community manager or social things, we're teaching change, we're making, oftentimes people either want to be heard or you're having them, they're in an uncomfortable situation, and if you're able to kind of, remember that the greater good of what you're doing is worthwhile, it kind of helps you not, go to bed and question everything you did that day, because I think that's the worst part that you can do, is because then they are winning, right? You don't want to give them the power, the haters the power.
Some of it is too that you build your best customer relationships in the trenches, right? I mean, if you look back and think about your business now, or sometime, or even some of your best friendships in life, right? How many of them did you have like a really, really difficult period, that you went through and came out of together? I've always said that, these really hard situations that they get you into, you remind yourself that if you can get through them and solve them together, you'll probably have an advocate for life, or at least for a very, very long time. Those people that are always happy and they're happy from the beginning and they stay happy, they're only one bad situation away from not being. So if we can weather a storm or two together, I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I try to remind myself of that when I'm going through hard times with clients or people in the community.
It's important, too, to keep perspective. When someone's yelling at you or unhappy, really just reminding yourself of it is what it is. It's a conversation where someone's really upset. They're not curing cancer. There aren't people dying in emergency room. Just remembering what you're doing. I kind of have a joke that I say to myself when our members start getting on, if they get unhappy or if a customer's unhappy, is it's pet food. Nobody's going to jail today. Nobody's dying of cancer. It's pet food. Just to kind of center myself and remind myself to keep perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So, I have a private list on Twitter that is the people that inspire me. And usually if I'm having like one of those days where things aren't going well, even the hashtag quote where you listen to things where, I have a poster that is that, the 8 greatest failures, and there are 8 of the greatest leaders we've ever had that have failed and done bad things. Michael Jordan was told he was too small. Oprah Winfrey was told that, a black woman would never be on TV. And, like those things, when you look at like the greater good and the greater peace, or like, the things that people are doing from a great, follow the hashtag creating is, the shout out to Alette and Tim McDonald, what they're doing with really helping change the world. In the scheme of things, someone not having access to TV or being pissed off because they lost in a video game is not near as bad as what else is going on. So yeah, I love that idea. I love private lists of different things for different reasons like that, including ones that are people that will always make me smile, or the ones that will always drop funny gifs. And I saw here the one of the picture where Carrie Keenan put on there, breathe. That's always a good recommendation. Play the Faith Hill album, right? That's the.
Well, the new hierarchy of needs. I think self-actualization has been displaced, and now it's internet service. So, what do they say? Like food, water, and internet is all we need. So, I guess perspective is key, and definitely remembering it's not the end of the world, but also remembering if you are truly empathetic, don't assume what you think is trivial to them. Because if you treat it that way, it's one thing to feel that way, it's another thing to let that affect the way you act.
And you are what you tweet, or you are what you post, right? So that's the caveat here with our digital footprint always being out there. If what you're going to say that you might regret the next day is often something that you wish you would have never done. So I hide my phone whenever I go out and have one or too many cocktails, because the drunk texts that are going to go off are not going to be worth dealing with the next day. And it's kind of that same way with the thick skin. If you can, sleep on it or come back the next day, or even let kill the conversation, say, let me get my manager involved, and then come back and say, well, my manager wasn't available, but let me see if we can restart this conversation. Hopefully they got up on the right side of the bed instead of the wrong one.
I think that's a really good point. I think a tactic or a good tip for building thick skin is just taking a moment when you're in the heat of it and when you're really upset and thinking to yourself, am I going to be happy with what I said tomorrow? If when I'm level-headed, if I return to this conversation, would I have said this, or would I be saying this? And I guess in a way it is kind of selfish, and it's trying to make sure you're, I don't want to say saving face because that implies that you've already done something wrong, but just remembering that you're putting yourself out there and you need to be reflecting yourself in the best way possible, and kind of that care and love for yourself is a great thing to think about when you're upset and you're speaking with upset community, and and thick skin. It's like, somebody can affect me, or somebody can try to affect me, and they can put horrible words out there in public, but is that something that I really want to be doing? And in the heat of the moment, sometimes it seems like that's the best thing to do, to be biting, to be, negative. But if you just take a breath, take a step back, and think to yourself, how am I going to feel about this in 12 hours? How am I going to feel about this tomorrow? It's a really great way to put yourself in check and maintain perspective.
It's a question for the group, and if you guys don't have time to answer this, you can let me know, but is there ever a time that just pure ignore, or just no response makes more sense? Have you guys ever found a time in a community where it just makes sense to completely ignore what somebody's doing, trolling, their activity, someone you've maybe dealt with a number of times?
I feel like what Rebecca said about if they're being verbally abusive, I feel like that's the time to I just ignore, because then you're just feeding them. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like they're getting what they want.
Yeah, we used to have a thing in our ticketing system where we put the word mute by the person's name, and it was often because we responded to them 5 different ways, and the one time we didn't respond to them or we just let it go was the most successful time we had. And so when that person came into our ticketing system and we saw them having a problem and we saw the word mute next to it, it was like the one that we could say, okay, we don't have to address that because it worked before. I'm not saying it's going to work every time. That's a good question, because ignoring it sometimes fuels the fire. Other times it lets them cool down enough to where maybe they're like, oh wow, I shouldn't have been complaining about that, because there's much greater things to be worrying about than the right side or the share buttons on your website aren't working.
I am of the mind that you should not ignore your trolls. You should not ignore people. I just don't think that works. It can aggravate them, make them worse. I know that it works on some people, but I still feel like you can save these people. That the ardent, most hateful and demeaning people are ultimately on your side. They want things to be better, and it's just a matter of finding a way to make it better for them. That's not to say that you can't fire your person, your community member. There are times when you just absolutely have to say, I'm sorry, you're not welcome here anymore. But, I think that you should not ignore them, because that can make it worse. That, it's like other people will see you ignoring them too. It's like they're complaining, they're not responding to him. Why aren't they responding to him? So I just feel like that you can do that.
Well, could you ever put it out there, though, David, like, hey, if they've publicly, privately, and gone after you, say, hey, we've tried to communicate and help you in X number of ways. Here's a document to show your community. I mean, this is just I'm putting this out there as an idea. Show all the things you've done and ways you've tried to help.
I think you can. No, I wouldn't post a document with all the communication, because that just...
Well, not the personals of it, just the steps you've taken, and just be like, beyond this, there's really nothing more that can be done. Because some people will suck your life. I mean, they will suck the life out of you.
Yeah, and I've had... They will. They will. But if you can go in and say, okay, so I've tried to help you, I'm not sure what more I can do, have me off this channel, and then you can maybe get it off out of your community. But I think it's perfectly fair to say there's not much more. I don't know past what we've done. And I think it's okay to say we may not have a solution for you. And companies are really afraid to say that. They don't want to have that situation where they can't make every customer happy. But sometimes you absolutely have to say, I'm sorry, there's just nothing that we can do to fix this.
I thought it was funny. One of the communities that I'm involved in on Google on G+, and I'm not the moderator or community manager on it at all, but it's a great community. And she kind of voiced her concerns with me on a Hangout about a week ago and said that she just aren't all of the trolls or people she fires back with humor, and usually self humor. So she'll have a picture. She has a GIF of herself going, "Must have been a blonde moment," and like that's her way of like anybody who is hating, even if she's not continuing the conversation, but she said for her it works because it kind of kills the conversation but lets them know that it's heard. And if the person continues to fire back after that, she'll continue to engage, but then they at least know that they were heard and you were taking kind of light of it. I don't think it works in every community, but this one I think is a very interesting one because it's a large community, but it's a very I'd say a very group that's around the same kind of ideas. And by seeing that, when you see that GIF or you see some humor added to it, I think most of the people in there realized, like, okay, that I was probably out of line, or maybe that wasn't something I needed to say.
I think
I do have one thought. I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead if you want to tie into that.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
I was going to have this one thought. I mean, we got 2 minutes left, and I don't want this to be the last thing said, but I do want it to be said. In this age where our lives are so much in the public, as a community manager, I think it's very important that you keep as much of your personal information as you can hidden. If you look for me online, you'll know that I live in Austin, but you will not know where in Austin I live. There's not a phone number out there that can tie to me. And I say this because in the past I have had people in my community try to post my address, or what they thought was my address, I should say, and encourage people to come over and visit me. And it's just, one of those things where you have to, have that buffer of protecting yourself. So please, someone jump in with something on a higher note than that.
Send
'cause that's a
flowers.
downer.
Send flowers to David. Here's his address, right?
David already challenged me on finding more than 3 pictures of him online. I might have to do the address one now, because I think we David are the opposite sides of the spectrum, where I have like a pin dropped on my house where you could probably log in and I would be okay with you looking in my house. We completely kind of see 2 different worlds on that, so I might take that challenge up to find your address now.
I will tell you that I'm so protective just because of that one incident where people were trying to post stuff about me. People knew I had kids, but until my kids were about 13, you didn't know whether they were boys or girls. You didn't know how old they were. Nothing. And now it's still a little hard to find them online because they don't care about it so much like the rest of because we kind of put that buffer and said, I think I scared the crap out of them. I said, if you put it online, just assume that 10 minutes later it's going to be on a billboard on your way to wherever you're going. So just know that if you put it out there, it's there permanently.
I treat every social action like my mom can see it.
Yeah,
and that's how I handle it.
All right, guys. I know we didn't want to end on this note, really, but it's 3 o'clock, so we do have to go. But it's really great having you all here. Join us next week. We're talking about restaurant community management, I believe. And also a quick shout out to Carrie and Sarah, who are managing things on the Twitter end. Thank you so much. And to Brian for co-hosting here. So thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.